Hey, what's up guys? My name is Sal, and this is another expedition log. Today we continue the ExLog Phase 4 Epoch Baltimore saga. Getting a little further away from the city into adjacent locales in Baltimore County to visit a relatively young mall which, despite having recently lost one of its anchors, is thriving. As always, I hope every one of you are well out there, keeping safe and sound with you and yours. Only a small percentage of the viewers that watch my content are subscribed to my channel, so if you like my content, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell. The mall we're visiting today is a Jim Rouse gem, and it's what I've always wanted the now abandoned Burlington Center to aspire to in terms of success. The architecture is incredibly similar to Burlington, along with the aesthetic language throughout the mall serving as a near-carbon copy, minus Petal the Elephant. So today, come take a walk with me through the White Marsh Mall in White Marsh, Maryland. But first, a word from our sponsor. A young but still pretty old-looking version of Fraser Crane's dad, directing a restaurant chain in success unsuccessfully. Enjoy.
The fundamental reason for our success has always been QSC, because quality, service, and cleanliness sell.
Excuse me. You?
So take a look at your staff. When people come to McDonald's, above all else, they want fast service.
Anybody here?
Blazing fast service.
Can you help me, please?
Service that greets them at the counter and dazzles them with its speed and professionalism. Make your customers visit to your store the convenient experience they expect. We can best deliver that fast service by having the right person in the right place at the right time.
What do you want?
Anything. I'm in a hurry. It doesn't matter.
So make an investment in labor. Get your morning staff in early so the store can be ready when it's open. There's nothing like good preparation and planning to improve the speed of your service.
Hey, Mark, the bins are empty.
And speed means keeping bin levels at max.
Sorry, but I was in the playland cleaning gum out of Mayor McCheese's nose. What do you want?
So make a commitment to use a full-time production caller.
Give me a quarter pounder order 5 and a Coke.
Sure. 2 quarter pounders, 1 scrambled egg.
It's a skilled position that is the key to balancing fresh food and fast service. Add a person to your drive-thru. In fact, put your best crew in the drive-thru area. People demand fast service there more than anywhere else. Remember, speed kills on the highway, not in the drive-thru. That's why we insist on speed, speed, and more speed. Service, 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 and more service. That is the cornerstone of our business.
In the early 1970s, the tiny area of White Marsh in Baltimore County was set to explode with a 1,500-acre multi-purpose community with housing, shopping, offices, industry, and recreational amenities under sponsorship of Nottingham Properties Incorporated on land that they owned. Nottingham tapped the Rouse Company to build a mall directly in the middle of their burgeoning new city in 1971. It took a few years, but on January 17, 1973, the zoning was approved for Nottingham's land to be used for business major use, with a town center core across 170 acres. The proposed mall would have 1.25 million square feet of floor space, with 4 anchors and somewhere between 125 and 150 smaller retail shops. By September 19, 1974, the mall was projected to have an opening in the fall of 1976, according to John Hannigan, who was the project manager at the time for the Rouse Company. The mall faced delays through the mid-1970s, and by December 9, 1977, the Rouse Company signed an agreement for $118,250,000 in financing for 5 upcoming mall developments, of which White Marsh was included. For the White Marsh development, $20,850,000 was allocated for the mall. On February 5, 1978, the opening date was pushed back yet again to the fall of 1980, and then on September 25, 1979, it was announced that construction was underway, but that the opening wouldn't be until summer of 1981. After over 10 years of planning, delays, loan adjustments, zoning arguments, and courting anchors, the White Marsh Mall had its official grand opening and ribbon-cutting ceremony on August 12, 1981. The mall was anchored by JCPenney, Woodward and Lothrop, Bamberger's, Sears, and a full-service Hutzler Brothers, which had a restaurant and bar. The night before the mall opened to the public, there was a cocktail party held inside for executives and special guests. However, a string of massive, violent thunderstorms raged through the area, causing severe flooding and a power outage. The next morning was to be the grand opening, but the parking lot entrances were flooded with 4 to 6 feet of water, as straw, which was placed to protect the grass, had washed away, clogging drains, therefore causing the floods. Crews worked in the early morning to get the muck cleared, but even as the doors opened, there were still workers putting finishing touches on the mall, with hammers and drills buzzing throughout the concourses. This is one of my favorite stores in any mall that I've ever visited, ever. Regen. They sell a bunch of vintage games and consoles and memorabilia from video games and culture around video games back in the day. I have a humble collection of vintage video games, and there really has never been something that I was looking for that I couldn't find at this place. And if vintage video games are your thing, and if you're in the White Marsh area, you have to make sure that you stop at Regen. The people are super cool that own the place. They let you kind of just play around with the stuff, and you can get pretty hands-on with this stuff so that you know what you're buying. Because a lot of times when you're buying collectibles, you need to know if it's actually in good shape. But they have so much really cool vintage stuff here. And again, if you're in the area, make sure to visit the White Marsh Mall and to see Regen. Those people didn't tell me to say that, by the way. It's really that awesome of a place. The grand opening of the White Marsh Mall was extravagant, to say the least. Rouse executives were strolling the jam-packed concourse in their dark suits, watching as shoppers filled the courtyards among the sounds of gurgling fountains and the smell of fried food wafting through the air. As the executives looked on at their successful grand opening, they noticed a trend in the first week of mall openings. They noticed that most of the shoppers weren't actually buying anything, but were just packing into the stores, which offered free opening day and week specials. The owners, management, and executives were pretty familiar with this trend after opening a handful of other malls, so the lack of revenue really wasn't concerning. And as a matter of fact, they looked on at this lack of revenue and the hordes of people packing into these stores with some reverence. The White Marsh Mall would go on to be incredibly successful, becoming one of Baltimore County's premier shopping destinations. Rouse made the decision to almost clone the White Marsh Mall with the construction of the Burlington Center in Burlington, New Jersey, which opened just 1 year later after White Marsh on August 6, 1982. While the floor plans of the two malls aren't identical, the aesthetic treatments such as staircases, escalator placement, lighting fixtures, and clerestory windows are complementary enough that I can consider Burlington Center to be the sister mall to White Marsh. Unfortunately, Burlington Center is now shuttered and sitting abandoned. However, I have covered this mall in detail across 2 episodes. Make sure to check out ExLog 12 to see Burlington while it was still open, and ExLog 40 to see a full video tour of the mall as it sits abandoned, along with fantastic detail of the famed Xenos Frodakis fountain called the Waterhole, featuring Petal the elephant. The juxtaposing stories between Burlington Center and White Marsh, they tell a very stark tale between the management style of Rouse and how successful they were, and the management style of Moonbeam and how utterly inept they are. Moonbeam killed Burlington, hands down. In 1986, the mall would see its first change in the anchor lineup. Bamberger's was founded back in 1893 and bought out in June of 1929 by Macy's, when Macy's was still known as R.H. Macy & Co., after its founder Roland Hussey Macy. After the acquisition, Macy's chose to keep the Bamberger's masthead on the acquired stores, but decades later, on October 5th, 1986, all Bamberger's stores adopted the Macy's name, and all stores, including the White Marsh location, were converted. Another long-standing Maryland retailer would go defunct by 1990, when the Hutzler brothers shuttered operations after 132 years. Their business was so lucrative that upon ceasing operations, the company had never been through one bankruptcy or lawsuit, and they simply liquidated their assets quietly and locked the doors, and retired with dignity. The Hutzlers at the White Marsh Mall would be replaced by Baltimore-founded Hecht's, which opened in its place on Thursday, October 10th, 1991. Around this time, White Marsh was still doing pretty well. But if you remember from ExLog 72, the Towson Town Center had undergone its, quote, topping off, close quote, enclosure project in 1982. And just 5 days after the White Marsh Hecht's opened, Towson Town had completed its massive expansion, bringing a 4-story Nordstrom to the area, offering wide-ranging shopping options across the mall, directly drawing traffic away from White Marsh. Seemingly dwarfed by the shadow of Towson Town Center, White Marsh Mall would trudge forward relatively unscathed through the years. The next anchor shakeup would occur in 1995, when the Woodward and Lothrop, known affectionately by locals as Woody's, would shutter after 108 years serving the Mid-Atlantic region. Woody's was bought out by none other than the May Department Store Company. So, back at White Marsh, there was already 2 May Department Store Company stores operating, Macy's and Hecht's. So they chose to rebrand the Woody's into another May-owned asset, and Lord & Taylor opened in its space in 1998 after a short stint of vacancy and renovation. It was also in 1998 that 2 important events would bolster White Marsh for future success. With construction coming to an end after 2 years, the open-air supplementary avenue at White Marsh opened, giving shoppers new options directly across the street adjacent to the White Marsh Mall. This was a direct boost to traffic and sales, and remains so to this day. Alongside the avenue opening in 1998, a critical piece would fall into place when the Rouse Company made an important real estate acquisition. Rouse acquired the Hahn Company on April 6, 1998 in a $1.1 billion deal. Now, Hahn had nothing to do directly with White Marsh Mall, but Hahn owned Towson Town Center, and it was in Rouse's best interest to not let 2 seemingly competitive malls slip. So, it was at this point that strategic changes were put in place to not let Towson Town siphon off of White Marsh, and to give the 2 unique and attractive features to draw organic growth and sustain traffic. I do feel that it's worth mentioning that while it doesn't exist as a literal out parcel as part of the White Marsh Mall, there's an IKEA furniture store that opened in 1988, which is maybe just a 1-minute drive from the White Marsh Mall. And this is also one of the unique traffic generators for the White Marsh Mall. So coupled with the avenue at White Marsh and the array of features and amenities and shopping at the White Marsh Mall, IKEA also boosts the traffic at this mall, which lets it compete with other area malls where otherwise White Marsh probably would fail. So IKEA is definitely an asset, even to this day, in generating traffic and revenue for the White Marsh Mall and its direct area. Things began to get interesting as we crossed into the 21st century. In November of 2004, the Rouse Company was acquired by Chicago-based General Growth Properties for a huge $12.7 billion deal, snatching up both White Marsh Mall and Towson Town Center in the process. It was also at this time that Lord & Taylor would close at White Marsh to make way for 2 new offerings in its split-level anchor space. That same year, a Sports Authority would open in the top floor of the former Lord & Taylor, with a Hecht's home store opening downstairs. Just 2 years later, the Hecht's chain went defunct, with all locations being rebranded to Macy's, including the location at White Marsh. The former Bamberger's turned Macy's location was shuttered, and Macy's moved into the former Hutzler's turned Hecht's space, while the Hecht's home store under the Sports Authority was rebranded to a Macy's Home as part of the company changes. The vacant ex-Bamberger's turned Macy's was reoccupied by Boscov's, which opened on Saturday, October 28, 2006. The US economy collapsed in 2007 and 2008, and the United States was plunged into its worst recession since the Great Depression in the 1930s. While upwards of $8 trillion were lost in stock markets, unemployment hurtling towards 10%, and Americans losing value in all of their assets, malls and developers across the country were tanking. It's true that malls such as White Marsh and Towson Town fared just fine through the recession, but their parent companies were quietly failing. With the recession ending in 2008, developers were trying desperately to recover. The Boscov's department store chain had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, bringing Albert Boskov out of retirement to save the company. As part of the plan, 10 Boskov stores were closed, including the White Marsh location. And if you want more detail on the Boskov's company, make sure to check out my ExLog 63 on the Steamtown Mall. Most developers were struggling post-recession, and General Growth Properties' financial troubles would come to a boiling point in 2009 when they failed to repay $900 million in loans. They faced bankruptcy and filed for protection. But Brookfield Asset Management injected $2,625 million with an equity investment into GGP in February 2010, and by November, they had all creditors paid and exited bankruptcy protection. 2 years after GGP survived bankruptcy court, Boscov's would reopen their White Marsh location, bringing them all back to full anchor tenancy. Through the mid-2010s, White Marsh Mall saw little change and continued to generate a healthy stream of revenue with a fairly high occupancy and a full set of anchors until 2016 when the Sports Authority would shutter. By August of 2017, I showed up to film this place officially for the ExLog for the first time. In November 2018, GGP was acquired by Brookfield Properties for an astounding $21.5 billion. This doesn't come as a surprise, since Brookfield was the majority shareholder in GGP after their $2.625 billion equity injection into GGP in 2010. So the deal was to be expected. As this deal was going down, though, Sears was in dire straits, with the greasy crime swamp led by Eddie Lampert lining their pockets while the company imploded in on itself. Sears locations were closing all over the country, and in the back of my mind, I constantly thought, the Sears at White Marsh can't die. This place is bulletproof. As more closures were announced by the month, White Marsh evaded closure, and I made sure to get my oil changes and maintenance done at the Sears Auto at White Marsh for the Quartermaster and Nissan Z as often as required, just to patronize the establishment. But then 2020 happened. 2020 emerged from its rat-infested bunker to disrupt our way of life in every imaginable way without mercy. By March, COVID-19 reared its stupid, disgusting self to the world, and by April, the unthinkable happened. The Sears at White Marsh closed, leaving them all without an anchor for the first time in over a decade. The footage you're looking at right now, this footage is the very first thing that I ever shot for the Expedition Log series. As I've told you in previous ExLogs, I was out at a music festival in Shippensburg when I stumbled upon Dan Bell's channel, and looking for a new project in film, I decided that I wanted to try my hand at the kind of videos that he was making. So I went out to Chambersburg and I failed miserably. After that failure at Chambersburg Mall, I decided to get a camera that I thought would be stealthy, and I settled on a GoPro. So I went to the White Marsh Best Buy and I purchased it, and I immediately came here to the mall to film the old Suncoast, which I had discovered on Dan Bell's second channel in a video that he did in 2016. The footage that you're seeing right now that I shot with that GoPro, it's not good. It's terrible. Using a GoPro, it turned out to be just a grotesque misadventure, producing such memorable flops as ExLog 2 at the East Point Mall and the shaky cam mess of my first Marley Station episode, ExLog 5. Frankly, the first 5 ExLogs were pretty rough. Either way, what you're looking at is the footage that began my series. This Suncoast motion picture at the White Marsh Mall, as filmed with my GoPro on August 11th, 2017, was the catalyst for the ExLog. Why didn't I release this footage sooner? Well, I've always thought that my series should tell a larger story, and at the time, I really didn't like the way the footage presented itself on its own. I didn't think that it made a full episode. So I sat on it, and I waited for a moment to insert it into a larger, more meaningful composition. You're watching that piece right now. And I appreciate you guys taking a walk with me through this Suncoast, because this is the beginning of the ExLog. However, this Suncoast has since closed, and the entire area near the former Sears has been converted. But man, how awesome is it to see an old Suncoast with those TVs and all that retro stuff in there. That neon can give you sunburn. I came back to the mall with my camera 1 year later in March of 2018 to capture the footage that you're seeing right now. Welcome to the Upside Down in White Marsh, Maryland, home of the former Suncoast Motion Picture Company, where you can be bathed in weird, unknown particles floating in the air, reminiscent of the Chernobyl disaster. At the time of my filming this, obviously the Suncoast was being gutted, you can see that. But the space was to be refabricated into this massive modular beauty salon. It seemed, though, that the conversion of this place was being done pretty carelessly, with the lights dangling from the ceiling and exposed wires just strewn about. Safety wasn't on the menu today here, kids. And while I know that I definitely wasn't supposed to be back there, it does appear that the folks contracted to work in here probably couldn't spell OSHA. But there really wasn't much of interest to see in here. All of the actual Suncoast stuff was removed, like the TVs and posters, so I didn't think it really warranted a more in-depth explore that day. But all things have an end. And the Suncoast was successfully dismantled after a few months of work so people could come and get their haircuts or to get their nails done or whatever it is people do inside that place. I have no clue. I haven't gotten a haircut in over a year, so I'm not the authority on this. I come to the mall for pretzels and fountains, and thankfully they left one fountain in operation at White Marsh, albeit with a weaker stream than before. But it came to my delight that kids still do seem to enjoy tossing their parents' money into the fountain. Watching this normalcy warms my heart. While most of my series has covered the twilight of American brick-and-mortar retail, with an emphasis on the history and pedigree of malls and their developers, we have to think about the future, about the thriving malls that will still survive in the wake of the gray ghosts disappearing across the country. COVID-19 seems to have left White Marsh unscathed, as Sears' closure was just a consequence of poor executive management and sheer greed. However, it left the customer, you and me, with a renewed lust towards in-person shopping and a sense of normalcy, which I think we're all craving right now. And I think this sense of urgency for a new normal will bring the surviving malls back even better than they were before the pandemic, even if it does take a little more time than we'd like. I'd like to thank all of you for watching my video. While I was living out in Baltimore County, White Marsh was always my utility mall. Whenever I needed a pair of jeans, shoes, or other clothes, maybe to buy a video game, or just a quick lunch at the food court, or to take a half an hour to space out in front of the dribbling Macy's fountain. White Marsh was always my go-to mall when I lived in Baltimore County. I couldn't help but be reminded of Burlington Center and the birds that sing around that mall when I heard the birds in these bushes here at White Marsh. It's stuff like hearing the birds singing at White Marsh and thinking about the Burlington bird, its mascot. It's stuff like that that really sticks with me. Is there a weird thing about your local mall that just sticks with you that somebody might not notice? Let me know down in the comments. I've had an absolute blast creating this Baltimore saga while I stay close to home during the pandemic, and I have plenty of stuff to show you still, without dipping into my other backlogs. Those are going to be kept secret for future phases. We're going wider outside Baltimore City, and we might reach even down to DC once again. But these are all malls and areas that I've frequented on dozens of occasions, either while at school down in DC or while living in various parts of Baltimore. So please be sure to stay tuned for some fantastic locations as we continue through the ExLog Phase 4 epoch. I want to send a special shout out to my patrons who directly contribute to my expeditions, enabling me to do more and to show more on my channel. You guys are the rock stars. Thank you so much. I'd also like to show some appreciation to the Dead Malls of Discord family, to whom I owe a deep debt of gratitude for keeping me sane these past several months, and for indulging me with awesome voice chats, and for hosting awesome game nights. If any of you out there want to get in on this party, you could do it for free. You just download Discord for free on your computer or mobile device, then you click the link in my description to join, again, for free. A lot of people out there are thinking that Discord is some paid service, and I can assure you, while tons of work has been put in by myself, the admins, and mods to make it a friendly place, it's still free for you guys. You just need to answer a couple of questions with a mod when you join, and that's it. Make sure you guys are also following me on Twitter and Instagram at Salvatore Amadeo, and if you're into Facebook, you can catch sporadic posts by me at Quite Studios. Once again, Phase 4 has been a blast to make, and we've covered some incredible ground. This phase will be rounding out by the end of the year, and the Phase 5 epoch will debut in very early 2021, so get stoked for that. I'll see you guys in a week or two with ExLog 74. But until then, stay safe, take care, and have a fantastic day.